Captain Jake Morrison lounged in the back row of Xenobiology 401, watching his classmates shuffle into the lecture hall as if they were marching toward their own execution. To be fair, considering today's subject was apex predator studies, maybe that comparison wasn't far off. The Galactic Academy had been surprisingly generous in admitting Earth's first exchange student, though Jake suspected it had more to do with novelty than any genuine respect for human intellect. After all, humans hailed from what the galaxy politely referred to as a Class 12 death world. In hushed whispers around the dormitories, it carried a different name: the Nightmare Planet, where literally everything is trying to kill you. Jake found the whole reputation hilarious. At the front of the hall, Professor Quill, an imposing, mantis-like creature standing nearly 7 feet tall, his ego towering twice that, adjusted the holographic display with precise clicks of his serrated mandibles. From the very first day, Quill had made his position clear. Morrison's enrollment in an advanced Xenobiology course was either an administrative blunder or some cosmic prank. "Today, class," Quill announced, his compound eyes gleaming with what could only be described as academic bloodlust, "we examine the most chilling facet of predator psychology." He paused for dramatic effect. "We will experience firsthand the bone-freezing vocalizations that evolved to paralyze prey across 17 star systems." Vex, the crystalline student 2 seats away, immediately began vibrating with visible distress. Her translucent body flickered chaotically, like a living mood ring spiraling out of control. "Professor," she stammered, her voice echoing in brittle harmonics, "shouldn't we have psychological counseling on standby for this session?" "An excellent point, Vex," Quill replied, nodding approvingly. "Dr. Nimbus will be monitoring our stress levels remotely." In the front row, Terra, the Solonian aquatic student, shifted uneasily, fluffing her external gills. Her portable water tank sloshed as she nervously topped it off, preparing, perhaps, to hide beneath the surface if things became unbearable. "Professor," she said carefully, "my species has generational trauma from the deep-sea predators of our world. Perhaps I should excuse myself." "Nonsense, Terra," Quill cut her off. "Only by confronting our fears can we understand them scientifically." Jake couldn't resist a grin. "You do realize these are just recordings, right? Speakers can't actually kill you." Every student turned to stare. Quill's antennae twitched in what Jake had already come to recognize as seething irritation. "Ah yes, our human exchange student," he said, drawing out the word human as though describing a contagious rash. "I suppose, coming from your charming little death world, constant terror is your normal state. To you, this may seem mundane." Jake shrugged. "I mean, I grew up in Colorado. I've heard plenty of weird animal noises. Can't be that different." Vex's crystalline form turned completely transparent in shock. You lived among predators? Voluntarily?" "Well, yeah," Jake said matter-of-factly. "That's where the best hiking trails are." Quill clicked his mandibles in sharp dismissal. "I think you'll find, Morrison, that galactic apex predators operate on a vastly different scale than the quaint wildlife of your backwater planet." Jake leaned back, the corner of his mouth lifting in a grin that would have made any Earth predator proud. "We'll see about that, Professor." Quill dimmed the lights with relish. "Very well. Let us begin our descent into the darkest corners of predatory evolution." The holographic display shimmered, projecting a spiraling galaxy dotted with pulsing red markers. Jake thought it looked like some teenager's attempt at designing a horror video game map. "Our first specimen," Quill declared dramatically, "comes from the shadow forests of Kepler 442b. The Umblestalker has terrorized 3 colonization attempts. Now listen, if you dare, to the cry that has driven entire settlements to madness." A low, warbling howl crept through the lecture hall speakers. It started as a whisper, then swelled into a shrill crescendo, like someone deflating a bagpipe while gargling mouthwash. The effect on the class was instantaneous and absurd. Vex shook so violently she resembled a tuning fork enduring an existential crisis. Her crystalline body flashed through the entire visible spectrum before settling on a sickly shade of yellow-green. Terra panicked and plunged into her water tank with a splash that drenched the first 3 rows, leaving only her terrified eyes peeking above the surface like some academic periscope. "Fascinating," Quill murmured, clearly savoring the spectacle. "Observe how the harmonic frequencies target auditory centers, inducing paralysis through sheer terror." Jake raised his hand lazily. "Professor, that just sounds like a moose with allergies." The sound cut off. "I beg your pardon?" "Yeah," Jake continued. "Back home we've got elk that make the same noise during mating season. Usually means they're congested. You should hear them after a good rain." Quill's antennae quivered in disbelief. "Morrison, this cry belongs to a predator that has consumed over 3,000 sentient beings." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "So, like a really successful moose." From her tank, Terra emitted a strangled gurgle, laughter, maybe, or hyperventilation. Quill's mandibles snapped. "Let us proceed to something more substantial." The next sound was a rising series of clicks and chitters that escalated into a piercing, ultrasonic scream. This time, Vex cracked, literally. A fracture traced down her crystalline arm as she whimpered in tones sharp enough to sting Jake's ears. "The Void Ripper of the Andromeda Spiral," Quill announced reverently. "Its call can shatter reinforced hull plating from 3 kilometers away." Jake tilted his head. "That's just cicadas. We get them in the summer. They don't rip anything apart, but they'll make sure you never sleep again. Dive bomb your head when you're just trying to grill some burgers." "Impossible," Vex whispered, her fracture spreading. "Harmless little bugs," Jake explained. "Stupid as rocks, terrible aim, but loud as hell for something the size of your thumb." The professor looked as though someone had told him his life's research was a community college hobby class. "Morrison," he hissed, "these are apex predators, perfected engines of terror and death." Jake shrugged. "Sure. But have you ever been to a family barbecue in July? Same vibe. Just with more potato salad and questionable uncles." Quill's mandibles clicked furiously now, a staccato rhythm of suppressed rage. Perfect. They were finally getting to the good part. The professor straightened to his full, imposing height, eyes narrowing with academic vindictiveness honed across 17 star systems. "Very well, Morrison," he said, voice dripping with venomous sarcasm. "Perhaps those earlier examples were too pedestrian for someone of your apparently vast deathworld expertise." Jake leaned forward, anticipation sparking in his grin. "Class," Quill intoned with solemn weight, "I present the apex of evolutionary terror. The sound that forced 3 separate stations into evacuation. The cry that drove the Xenator Mining Consortium to abandon a 1 trillion credit asteroid field rather than face the thing that uttered it." Professor Quill's manipulator arms danced across the console with theatrical precision. His mandibles clicked once, sharp and final. "Behold," he declared, "the death scream of the shadow cat of Proxima Centauri. No living mind has endured this sound and remained whole." At last, Jake perked up with genuine interest. Now this sounded promising. The speakers crackled alive, and the room was immediately engulfed in the most harrowing sound known to galactic science. It began as a guttural moan that seemed dredged up from the abyss itself, then swelled into a piercing wail that resembled 1,000 tortured souls being dragged screaming into eternal night. The class unraveled. Vex didn't just fracture this time. She detonated, her crystalline body shattering into a storm of glittering shards that rained across the floor, each piece vibrating in dissonant harmonics that stabbed at the ears. Terra's water tank bubbled violently as she hyperventilated underwater, creating the grotesque effect of a panicked jacuzzi. Across the rows, other students were visibly breaking down. One turned an alarming shade of violet and began leaking fluorescent fluid from his ear slits. The howl climbed to its crescendo, so powerful that the building's emergency systems flared, flooding the hall with pulsing crimson light, as if the very architecture had joined in the panic. And then there was Jake Morrison. The human exchange student from a nightmare world simply threw his head back and laughed. Not a polite chuckle, not a nervous bark. He laughed until tears ran down his cheeks. "Oh, come on," Jake wheezed between spasms of mirth. "That's just a cougar having a bad day." The sound cut off at once. The red lights flickered out. Silence reclaimed the room, broken only by Jake's laughter and the delicate tinkling of Vex's crystalline fragments settling onto the tiles. Quill stood motionless at his lectern, compound eyes locked on Jake with the kind of stunned disbelief reserved for discovering gravity had been a hoax. "A cougar?" the professor whispered. "Yeah," Jake said cheerfully, wiping at his eyes. "Mountain lion. Puma. Same thing. They make that exact noise when they're angry or looking for a mate. I grew up camping in the Colorado Rockies, Professor. That sound? That's just the soundtrack of family vacation. But the trauma reports. Oh sure, it's terrifying the first time," Jake admitted. "Scared the hell out of me when I was 8 and had to pee outside our tent at 2 in the morning. But you get used to it. My dad always said, if you can hear them, they're probably not hunting you. It's when they go quiet that you should worry." Tara's head broke the surface of her tank like a traumatized periscope. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. You grew up with such creatures?" "Well, not exactly with them," Jake corrected. "More like we shared the same postal code. They mostly keep to themselves unless you leave food out or get between a mother and her cubs. Then things get interesting." Quill's antennae trembled so violently they looked ready to snap off. "Morrison, are you telling me your species coexists with apex predators?" Jake shrugged. "Not coexist, really. More like, we ignore each other until somebody does something stupid. Works out fine most of the time." He paused, smirking. "Though honestly, Earth has scarier things than mountain lions. You want to hear about Australia?" The collective gasp from his surviving classmates was answer enough. No, they very much did not want to hear about Australia. But Jake leaned back in his chair with the air of a man determined to ruin the day. "Let me put this in perspective for you. That mountain lion you just heard? In Earth terms, that's basically a house cat with anxiety issues." Quill's compound eyes twitched violently. "Morrison, tell me you exaggerate." "Not even close," Jake grinned. "See, mountain lions are ambush predators. Kind of polite about it, really. They sneak in, quick and clean, everyone goes home, well, except the deer. But hey, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs." From her scattered fragments on the floor, Vex managed a wheezing tone of disbelief. "Polite predators." Jake's grin widened. "Right. Now let me tell you about grizzly bears." Several students flinched visibly. "These guys," Jake continued, eyes gleaming, "are 800 pounds of muscle, claws, and bad temper stuffed into a fur coat that shrugs off bullets. They can run 40 miles an hour, faster than any human. They climb trees better than us. They swim better than us. Basically, they're superior humans with worse manners." Tara submerged again, her tank frothing with terror bubbles. "And here's the kicker," Jake went on brightly. "Humans camp in grizzly territory for fun. We pay money to sleep in flimsy fabric tents while surrounded by creatures that can rip a car in half. We call it family bonding." One of the slug-like students made a noise like a deflating balloon and slid toward the exit. Quill didn't stop him. "Of course," Jake said, warming to his theme, "bears are nothing compared to great white sharks." The class stiffened as one. "These monsters are 20 feet of evolutionary perfection, murder machines honed over 400 million years. They can smell a single drop of blood from 3 miles away, bite through steel cages, and launch themselves 15 feet out of the water like a missile with teeth." "Surely," Quill said faintly, "your kind avoids such waters." Jake laughed so hard he snorted. "Avoids them? Professor, we invented an entire sport called surfing. It's basically dressing up like their favorite prey, floating right on top of their hunting grounds, and hoping for the best. Some humans do it professionally. We have tournaments. The remaining students stared at Jake with the horrified fascination normally reserved for witnessing a catastrophic accident unfold in slow motion. But wait, there's more, Jake said, slipping into the exaggerated cheer of an infomercial host. We haven't even gotten to Australia yet. A ripple of unease spread across the room. See, Jake continued with relish, Australia is what happens when an entire continent decides to major in homicide. They've got spiders the size of dinner plates that can kill you in 15 minutes. Snakes so venomous that one bite could drop 100 grown adults, and they'll chase you just for fun. Jellyfish that are practically invisible bags of floating death. And crocodiles so nasty they make alligators look like therapy animals. By now, Vex had managed to reassemble maybe 60% of her crystalline body. She trembled like a broken tuning fork about to shatter again. How do humans survive on such a planet? Oh, that's the best part, Jake said, his eyes sparkling with malicious glee. We don't just survive, we thrive. Australians will literally pick up venomous snakes with their bare hands and carry them off like they're helping a neighbor unload groceries. They hold barbecues in crocodile territory. They invented rugby, which is basically ritualized violence for entertainment, and they play it in fields full of things that bite. Professor Quill said nothing. His antennae drooped like wilted plants, his proud posture sagging under the weight of cognitive collapse. And here's the real kicker, Professor, Jake said, leaning forward conspiratorially. Everything I just described? That's what humans call a Tuesday afternoon. We don't merely coexist with predators, we seek them out. We pay money to swim with sharks. We hike through bear country. We camp where mountain lions scream through the night. We call it vacation. His words sank like poison into the collective psyche of students who considered an aggressive house plant a notable threat. Jake's grin sharpened. Humans don't fear predators, Professor. We are the predators. We just act civilized so dinner parties are less awkward. The lecture hall went deathly still. Jake could hear the bubbling from Tara's breathing apparatus, the faint crystalline chime of Vex trying to hold her form together. Finally, Quill spoke. His voice was a whisper, hollow and cracked. Morrison, what does your species actually find frightening? Jake tapped his chin, pretending to think deeply. Well, tax audits are pretty scary. Running out of coffee's a nightmare. And assembling IKEA furniture without the manual? That's where most humans break. The silence that followed was so profound Jake was fairly certain he could hear entire worldviews fracturing in real time. Quill looked like a man who had just been informed that mathematics was an elaborate prank. His compound eyes were glassy, his antennae hung limp, and a nervous twitch began creeping into his left mandible. Morrison, Quill croaked at last, his voice that of a being whose life's work had been invalidated in an instant. I find your claims difficult to accept. Jake shrugged easily. Hey, I get it. It's a lot. Tell you what, why don't I show you? You know. For science. Several students shifted uneasily, some clearly on the verge of fleeing, as Jake pulled out his tablet. Compared to the Academy's shimmering holographics and quantum processors, the little device looked laughably primitive. But it worked. Now, fair warning, Jake said, scrolling. These are just nature documentaries. The kind of thing we show to children on Sunday mornings while they eat sugary cereal. Educational TV. Vex, who had managed to reconstruct herself into something vaguely humanoid again, let out a crystalline whimper. See children watch predator footage while consuming nutrition? Oh yeah, Jake said breezily. It's practically tradition. Kids love it. He tapped the screen, and the wall display shifted into a sunlit African savanna. Okay, let's start easy. This here is a honey badger. On the screen, a small black and white creature, no bigger than a medium-sized dog, waddled across the grassland. Tara spoke up for the first time since the mountain lion incident. It looks rather cute. Jake's grin turned feral. Oh, just wait. The next 60 seconds played like a furry apocalypse. The honey badger fought off 2 jackals, terrorized a leopard, shredded a beehive while enduring hundreds of stings, and finally devoured a venomous snake like it was chewy spaghetti. Sweet merciful void, someone whispered from the back. That, Jake said proudly, is what happens when evolution gives up on balance and just builds pure aggression into a 20-pound package. Honey badgers don't care about anything. Lions steer clear. Hyenas cross the road. They've even been known to castrate buffalo for looking at them wrong. Quill's left antenna twitched uncontrollably. And humans coexist with these? Jake shrugged. Mostly we just admire them from a safe distance and make internet memes. But yeah, they live on the same planet we do. He swiped again. The screen filled with a massive, blubbery animal lounging in muddy water. Now, let's talk about hippos. The class exhaled in relief. Several students visibly relaxed. This appears less threatening, Vex said, hopeful now that her crystal body had stabilized. Jake gave her a pitying look. Oh, you sweet, naive thing. Hippos kill more humans in Africa than any other large animal. They're 3 tons of rage wrapped in muscle and fat, with jaws powerful enough to snap a crocodile in half. They can run 30 miles an hour on land, which is faster than most humans, Jake continued, and they're territorial, aggressive, and have absolutely zero chill about anything. On screen, the footage shifted. A hippo erupted from the river like a biological torpedo, its jaws yawning open to reveal teeth the size of railroad spikes. Another clip showed one casually biting a crocodile in half, like snapping a breadstick. What does this mean for the people who live there? Tara whimpered, her voice muffled from inside her tank. That's the beauty of it, Jake replied brightly. They look like oversized pool floaties, until you get too close. Then suddenly you've got an aquatic murder machine on your hands. It's nature's ultimate prank. He swiped again. The screen dissolved into the scene of a quiet suburban backyard. But honestly, Jake continued with cheerful menace, if you want real nightmare fuel, let's take a look at Australia's greatest hits. What followed was 20 minutes of concentrated biological horror disguised as a wildlife documentary. Jake narrated it like a cheerful Sunday morning host while the class sat frozen in mounting despair. First, a huntsman spider the size of a dinner plate ambled across a bathroom wall. Then came funnel web spiders, arachnids capable of biting straight through fingernails. Redback spiders lurking in toilet seat. Brown snakes, each one a slithering death machine with anger issues. Oh, and this, Jake pointed as the footage lingered on what looked like an ordinary koala, is a drop bear. Just kidding. Those aren't real. Australians made them up to terrify tourists. Honestly, with everything else on that continent, it's amazing they thought more monsters were necessary. By now, Vex had abandoned all pretense of holding humanoid form. She collapsed into a trembling puddle of crystal, chiming pitifully. Tara had constructed a fort out of aquatic vegetation inside her tank, peeking out through a leafy slit like a submarine periscope manned by the traumatized. Here's a saltwater crocodile, Jake went on, utterly unfazed by the emotional carnage. The screen showed a behemoth sliding silently into a river. These beauties can grow up to 23 feet, weigh more than a ton, and pack the strongest bite force of any living animal. They're smart too, smart enough to study human movement and plan ambushes. Australians call them salties. Some even keep them as pets. Quill made a sound like air hissing from a punctured hose. Pets? Well, not exactly house pets, Jake admitted, smirking. More like dangerous lawn ornaments that occasionally eat the mailman. He froze the frame on a close-up of a crocodile's unblinking eye, the predatory gaze filling the lecture hall like a curse. And now, my personal favorite. He swiped again. The wall filled with crystalline ocean water, calm, inviting. This is the box jellyfish, Jake said with the enthusiasm of a man sharing baby pictures. Also called the sea wasp, Because Australians name things with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. It's one of the most venomous animals on Earth. Tentacles stretch 10 feet. It's nearly transparent, so you never see it coming. One sting can kill an adult in under 5 minutes. The footage showed it drifting serenely, its tentacles trailing like ribbons at a deadly celebration. The pain, Jake added conversationally, is so intense that victims sometimes go into shock and drown before the venom even finishes them. And the best part? These things hang out along popular beaches. Australians have set up vinegar stations along the coast, just in case someone gets stung. Vinegar? Vex gurgled weakly from her puddle. Yep, Jake said deadpan. Apparently it helps with the venom. Or maybe it's just for the fish and chips. Australians are weird about condiments. With a snap of his tablet case, Jake closed the show. And that, Professor, is what humans consider a normal weekend nature documentary. We show this to kindergartners. The lecture hall was silent. Professor Quill hadn't spoken for 10 minutes. He stood frozen at the podium, staring blankly at the now dark display, compound eyes glassed over in shock. His posture sagged, his antennae drooped, and Jake swore he could see a faint tremor creeping into his mandibles. Tara cautiously raised her head from her plant fort. Her voice was a whisper. Jake, how has your species not gone extinct? Jake considered. Honestly? I think we're too stubborn. Plus, we invented beer. Helps with the stress. The atmosphere in the hall now resembled a trauma counseling session more than a lecture. Vex remained a quivering puddle of crystalline misery. Tara had fortified her aquatic bunker with additional vegetation. The handful of students who hadn't already bolted during the Australian segment now huddled together in the corner, forming what looked like a mutual support group for witnesses of human insanity. Professor Quill remained rooted in place, staring down at his controls as though they had betrayed him personally. The silence stretched, growing heavier, until it became unbearable. Jake was about to suggest calling it a day when Quill finally spoke. Morrison, he said without lifting his gaze, his voice hollow and cracked. I have devoted 47 years of my life to the study of predator behavior across 17 star systems. I have documented creatures that drove entire civilizations to extinction. I have catalogued the most terrifying sounds in the galaxy. Slowly, his eyes rose, and Jake was startled to see something like existential despair staring back at him. In all my years of research, Quill whispered, across every nightmare planet I have ever catalogued, I have never encountered anything as casually, horrifically dangerous as what you describe as your species' normal living conditions. Jake shifted in his seat, suddenly uneasy. He hadn't exactly intended to obliterate the professor's career. Look, Professor, I'm sure there are plenty of things scarier than Earth. No, Quill raised a trembling manipulator arm to silence him. Just no. His voice carried the sound of a soul unraveling. I must ask you something, Morrison. Answer honestly. Sure, Jake said carefully. Go ahead. What does your species actually consider genuinely frightening? What inspires true terror in humans? Jake leaned back, fingers drumming thoughtfully against his chin. For once, he took the question seriously. After all, he had just shredded the man's entire worldview. Jake figured he owed the professor a straight answer. Well, he began slowly, tax audits are legitimately terrifying. There's something about a government official combing through your finances with a magnifying glass that makes grown adults break down. We'll stand nose to nose with a grizzly bear, no problem, but stick us in a room with an IRS agent, and suddenly we're puddles on the floor. Professor Quill blinked, his compound eyes narrowing. Financial auditing? Oh yeah, Jake nodded. Paperwork-based terror is our kryptonite. Also, running out of coffee. That's a global emergency. Most humans don't even function until they've had their first cup. Some literally can't process information without caffeine in their system. Caffeine dependency, Quill echoed faintly. And don't get me started on customer service phone calls, Jake added. You know when you have to click through 17 menu options just to reach another human being, and then they put you on hold for 45 minutes while playing music that sounds like it was composed by someone who hates melody? From her crystalline puddle, Vex made a faint chiming noise. I do not understand. These things do not threaten your survival. That's the irony, Vex, Jake grinned. We'll jump out of perfectly good airplanes for fun, but ask us to call our insurance company to dispute a claim? Nope. Too stressful. We'll procrastinate for months. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Oh, and assembling IKEA furniture without the instructions? That's psychological warfare disguised as home decor. The Swedes weaponized flat-pack furniture, and somehow we keep buying it. From her aquatic fortress, Tara's muffled voice trembled. I am beginning to think your species might be insane. Jake beamed. That's fair. We're cosmic-level crazy. But we're functional crazy. Think of us as the galaxy's most successful psychopaths. We mostly channel the madness into extreme sports and elaborate practical jokes. This time, Quill's silence wasn't stunned paralysis. It was thoughtful, calculating. Morrison, he said at last, his voice measured. I believe we need to have a serious discussion about your academic placement. Jake arched an eyebrow. What, am I getting kicked out of Xenobiology for traumatizing my classmates? Quite the opposite. Quill's antennae perked, like wilted flowers reviving after rain. I'm recommending you for immediate transfer to the Advanced Survival Instructor Program. Wait, what? Morrison, Quill said firmly, in one class session, you've demonstrated more practical knowledge of apex predator behavior than most graduate students acquire in years. You've shown that humans possess an intuitive grasp of danger assessment that outperforms our most advanced threat analysis models. Do you understand what that means? He straightened, the fire of academia flickering back into his eyes. The Galactic Academy has spent decades trying to build reliable deathworld survival training. We keep losing colonists to planets labeled only mildly hazardous, because our assessment systems were built by species who consider strong wind a natural disaster. What we call advanced training is, apparently, what humans call Tuesday. Jake tilted his head. So, you want me to teach people how not to die? I want you, Quill said solemnly, to teach them how to think like a human. How to look at a creature that could split them in two and calmly decide whether it's actually dangerous, or just having a bad day. How to hear sounds that paralyze entire species, and recognize them as background noise. That is survival, Morrison. That is what you can offer. Jake considered this, his grin spreading. That actually sounds pretty cool. Do I get to show more nature documentaries? You may use whatever material you think prepares them best, Quill allowed cautiously. Within reason. Jake narrowed his eyes. Define within reason. Quill's antennae sagged. Please, no Australia until at least week 3. I'll need time to arrange extra medical staff. Jake laughed. Deal. But we're definitely starting with honey badgers. If you're teaching survival, you start with the gold standard of not giving a damn. As if on cue, the intercom crackled. Attention, students and faculty. This is Dean Throsack. We've received multiple reports of psychological distress emanating from Lecture Hall 7. Please confirm status. Quill looked around at the wreckage of his class. Vex was still a puddle on the floor. Tara remained barricaded in her aquatic bunker. The handful of surviving students were huddled together like survivors of a cosmic catastrophe. Quill activated his comm, Dean Throsack. This is Professor Quill. We're fine. We've discovered that our human exchange student is uniquely qualified to teach Deathworld Survival 101. Possibly more qualified than our entire faculty combined. There was a long pause on the channel. Professor, the dean said carefully, did you just suggest a first-year exchange student is more competent than our professional survival staff? Quill didn't hesitate. Dean, I'm saying that what we call advanced techniques are, 4 humans, just a normal Tuesday. I recommend restructuring our entire program around Morrison's practical expertise. Another pause. Then, very well. Morrison, report to my office after class. We must discuss your new teaching responsibilities. Jake rose, scooping up his battered tablet. He grinned at the shell-shocked classroom. Well, Professor, this has been educational. Same time next week. To his surprise, Quill actually chuckled, a sound like wind chimes made of sharpened glass. Morrison, I don't think there will be a next week. But I suspect you're about to be very busy teaching the rest of us how to survive in a galaxy far more dangerous than we realized. Jake turned toward the door, then hesitated. He glanced back at his traumatized classmate. Hey, before I go, anyone want to hear about Florida? The collective NO that erupted shook the walls. It was so loud Jake was fairly sure it registered on seismic sensors 3 floors below. He laughed all the way to the dean's office. Narrator's closing message. And so, Captain Jake Morrison's reputation at the Galactic Academy was sealed. Not as a student, but as the galaxy's first human survival instructor. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more journeys into strange new world. Hit like, share, and comment. Let us know your thoughts about humanity's place among the stars, and what kind of sci-fi stories you'd love to see next. The universe is vast, dangerous, and endlessly fascinating, and our next adventure is already waiting.